Welcome to the Stoic Responder Podcast. I'm your host, Christopher Healy. As a special agent who spent more than 15 years conducting large-scale fraud, money laundering, and public corruption investigations, Stoic philosophy provided a mindset edge that became the foundation of my professional success. My mission today is to share those same ancient mindset lessons with you so that you can turn obstacles into opportunities and adversity into advantage. Time to muster up. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Stoic Responder Podcast. This is episode 72, the Domino Effect. All right, let me start you out with, before I start you out, let me remind you about two organizations that are doing a lot for the law enforcement community. The first is, of course, the Overwatch Collective. It's a nonprofit podcast funding therapy sessions and supporting mental health initiatives for our first responders, our veterans, and their families. The motto over there is one more is one less, and I take that to heart because one more individual that they provide life-saving therapy services to is one less potential statistic in our community. Please check them out, theoverwatchcollective.com. Give a donation if you can to support their important work. But if you're not able to give a donation, or if you just prefer to support them in a different way, you can pick up some of their sweet t-shirts or sweatshirts like the one that I'm wearing right now. You can pick up a coffee cup over there, one of those really nice camp cups, those Yeti-style coffee cups with the Overwatch Collective logo on it. And if you pick up one of their coffee cups, one thing that you can fill it up with is Blue Badge Coffee. Mission of Blue Badge Coffee Company is to provide customers with the absolute best, highest quality premium coffee that their money can buy. They take a portion of each and every sale and donate it to law enforcement agencies around our great nation to assist them in funding or maintaining their peer support and wellness programs for their officers. These are super critical and crucial programs for the physical and mental well-being of hardworking officers in law enforcement agencies around the United States. So between the Overwatch Collective and Blue Badge Coffee Company, they're doing some great things for our law enforcement community. They are taking care of people in the way that they need to be taken care of. And I deeply appreciate the work that both of them do. So if you've got a couple of extra coins in your pocket, check out the overwatchcollective.com. Get yourself that coffee cup, then head on over to bluebadgecoffee.com. Get yourself some coffee to fill it up with. All right, guys, getting on with the show here. Let me start you out with a quote from Marcus Aurelius, our favorite emperor on the Stoic Responder Podcast. He says, "The responsibility is all yours. No one can stop you from being honest or straightforward." Again, I emphasize this because I think it's important. When Marcus Aurelius is talking like this, he's not talking to you, he's talking to himself, because this is something he wrote in his private diary, in his private journal. He's reminding himself, the emperor of Rome, someone who can be held accountable by no man. He's reminding himself, no one can stop you from being honest or straightforward. The responsibility is all yours. In other words, you wake up in the morning as the emperor of Rome, you have the opportunity to be the worst human being on earth, like Caligula, like Nero, like so many others, like Commodus, Marcus's son. Or you can wake up and you can be honest and straightforward. He's reminding himself that because powerful men should remind themselves of that. Wouldn't that be nice if the president, whoever our president is right now, because I'm not really sure who's running the country, but if the president woke up in the morning and said, looked himself in the mirror and said, or herself in the mirror and said, no one can stop you from being honest and straightforward today. Wouldn't that be something? No matter who the party is that's in control of the White House at any given time. You know, I don't think that gets repeated very often. I don't think the person in charge of any nation often sits down and looks at themselves and says, you have a responsibility to be honest and straightforward. It's because so many politicians are narcissists. We talked about this on Tuesday. You know, you put a camera in someone's face, you put them on stage enough, you surround them with people, you make them feel important enough. At some point, they're going to stop caring about the consequences of their actions because it's being reinforced on them on a daily basis that there are no consequences for their actions, that they have no responsibility to be honest and straightforward. But here in this situation, the only philosopher king we've ever had, Marcus Aurelius, is telling himself that. He's saying, listen, you got to be honest and straightforward, and no one can stop you from doing that. Now, this brings to mind that old chestnut, that concept. I think it's from Chaucer, or maybe it's Shakespeare, but power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. It's probably Shakespeare, not Chaucer. But we've all heard that, right? We've all heard absolute power corrupts absolutely. Power corrupts, right? When we give somebody we put them on top of a pedestal the oxygen gets light up there, that high horse, right? They stop thinking clearly. That happens time and time again. It brings to mind this kind of popular meme that I've seen a lot. You've probably seen it too. It's a screenshot from an educational video that was posted to YouTube years ago by this guy, Stephen Morris. He's like a professor or he's a teacher, but he posts educational videos to his YouTube channel. And one that he posted back in 2009 was showcasing how the domino effect works. And so he lined up a bunch of like progressively larger, like from microscopic tiny up to larger, quote unquote, dominoes. They're not really dominoes, but they're like, boards, right? And the idea is to show how, one small thing can eventually create momentum to take down this massive, big, like man-sized domino at the end of the chain. And people took a screenshot from that and they've turned it into a meme. And they usually, the way they do it is they take that first little tiny, almost microscopic domino and they stick a label on it with some insignificant event, like quote unquote, skipping class today. And then that last large domino, they stick a like life-changing thing on that domino, like becoming homeless. And it's like a humorous way to illustrate how one small step in the wrong direction, skipping class, can have this lasting impact on our lives. Like, oh gosh, I'm homeless now. I've lost everything, right? And, granted, like we've all skipped class. If you've been to college or high school, you've probably skipped a class or two in your life. You probably didn't become homeless because of it. But that kind of illustrates how slippery slopes work, the domino effect. You do one thing as a law enforcement officer that is wrong, it can lead in that direction of the big domino eventually falling. Now I'm going to take a second here. I'm going to give you a kind of story time with Christopher. Here's a personal story of me watching this occur in real time. My former special agent in charge when I first started with Department of Homeland Security Office of Inspector General was a guy named Gene Pedraza. It's actually Eugenio Pedraza, Eugenio, but he went by Gene. And you can look him up. You can Google Eugenio Pedraza, you can Google Gene Pedraza, and you can confirm the story I'm about to tell you. In 2011, Gene was a special agent in charge. As I said, he was my special agent in charge. He was in charge of the DHS OIG field office in McAllen, Texas. Now, there were about 9 employees, but that office had investigative purview over a significant portion of the Texas-Mexico border, like all of the border counties from Brownsville all the way to Laredo and beyond. I think even Del Rio may have fallen under his command. And then all the way up to Corpus Christi. So almost like, getting like a third of the state of Texas. Like if you were just to draw a line from Corpus Christi to Laredo, everything under that line was under his purview. So if there was a DHS asset or entity, a Border Patrol agent, a CBP officer, a TSA agent, an HSI agent, a Coast Guardsman, you name it, if there was money being spent from FEMA or from DHS in any of those counties, and we're talking millions of dollars, thousands of employees, if there was a detainee, if there was somebody arrested by the Border Patrol and put in a detention center that was managed by contract guards, if there was a Federal Protective Service employee who was supposed to be guarding a Social Security building or a courtroom, all of that, every bit of it fell under his authority as the special agent in charge to investigate. Anything that touched anything in that area fell on him. It's a tremendous amount of power. In 2011, like I said, he's the special agent in charge, overseeing all of the internal affairs for all of that, for all those agencies for that entire area. He gets informed at some point in early 2011 that the office that I worked in is going to have a routine inspection. Now, if you've worked for a law enforcement agency, this is a pretty regular thing. They have annual inspections of the different field offices. Sometimes they do, a half dozen field offices this year, and they'll do, the other half next year, or whatever the case may be. But he finds out in 2011 that he's up for review. Now, this is going to be his first review since he's been hired for this job. He's fairly new in the job. Office is a mess. For years, he had been opening up and assigning way too many cases, bad cases. His agents are overworked. Morale is in the toilet. Productivity is terrible. They haven't been making a lot of cases because they're overburdened with investigative duties. They're overburdened with too much stuff to make progress. And he knows he's going to have to take his lumps. Like, this inspection team's going to come down. They're going to probably get some bad information from the employees. People are going to be complaining. And he's worried. He's going to get a slap on the wrist. He's going to get an administrative slap on the wrist. He's not in danger of losing his job. He's not in danger of, getting fired or demoted or anything else. But there's going to be some corrective action, right? They're probably going to come down and they're going to say, hey, you need to close a bunch of cases. You need to do this better. You need to delegate better, yada, yada, yada. He's worried about that. He's nervous. He doesn't want to get a bad report card. He doesn't want to get a C on his report card. He wants straight A's. But it's too late for that. So what does he do? In his paranoia and his frustration, before the inspectors come down, he looks around the office and he identifies a couple of people who are climbers, the kind of guys who are really concerned about getting that next promotion, getting to the next level. He recognizes these lackeys as people who will work with him and help him kind of cover up some of the problems in the office. And so he gets them together. He puts them in a conference room. And then he also has some people that he can bully because he's like the GS-15. He's like, pretty high-level government employee. There's people low on the rung that he can kind of leverage. He can use his authority to force them to do things they otherwise wouldn't by threatening them with, maybe they'll get a bad review. They could lose their job. He won't, but they could. Maybe he could fire them. He's got authority to terminate people. He's got the authority to put someone on a performance improvement plan. He's got the authority to withhold your annual leave to keep you from going on vacation with your families. A lot of ways that a lot of levers that he can pull and move to get people to do his bidding. So he starts looking around the office and he starts kind of pulling those levers. He pulls in the lackeys. He pulls in the people he's bullied. And he kind of puts them all under one roof. And he says, we're going to cover up some of the problems in this office. And the way they were going to do that was they were going to create false memorandums of investigative activity and stuff them in case files to make it look to the inspectors like more work was being done, more progress was being made on cases than was actually being made. Now, again, I don't think Gene, even on his worst day, was the kind of guy who thought he was creating a criminal conspiracy to get out of an administrative wrist slap. I just think that once that tiny domino got kicked over, the momentum it created caused more and more dominoes to fall, and he got it over his head. Sure enough, what happens? Well, this harebrained scheme violates several federal statutes. And unfortunately, there was a guy working for this agency named Christopher Healy who caught wind of what was happening and reported it, caught wind of this conspiracy to falsify activity and case files, recognized that this is blatantly illegal, that there are real people being investigated here. And if you're falsifying case files, you could put real people in jail for crimes they didn't commit. We cannot do this. This is a fundamental no-no in the law enforcement community. You have got to be honest and forthright in your investigation. So I see this happening and I blow the whistle on it. It goes up to headquarters, and I'll spare you all the story. You've probably heard it before if you've listened to this podcast long enough, but at the end of the day, Gene Pedraza pushed over a very small domino, the need to protect his ego. And at the end of the day, rather than swallow his pride, catch a tongue lashing or a wrist slapping from his chain of command, that tiny domino protecting his ego set in motion a criminal conspiracy that eventually landed himself and a subordinate behind bars when the last domino fell. So you could take on that meme and you could write recruiting agents to falsify memos, and on that big domino you could write 36 months in Bureau of Prisons custody. That is the impact of doing the wrong thing one time, of having a bad idea and executing it. That is the impact. So circling back to what Marcus Aurelius said, the responsibility is all yours. No one can stop you from being honest and straightforward, right? Gene Pedraza had a lot less power than the Emperor of Rome. He had his own little empire in the Rio Grande Valley and Laredo in South Texas. He had a lot of power for a government employee, but he was still one man, far removed from the upper echelons of power in Washington, D.C. But he was so concerned about maintaining the stranglehold on that power that he was willing to wake up and be dishonest, to get off of the straightforward path. That is why Marcus Aurelius, a much more powerful man with much more responsibility than Gene Pedraza could have ever dreamed of, felt the need to remind himself in his diary, no one can stop you from being honest and straightforward. He's reminding himself that is within his control. And if that is within his control, presumably the ability to be dishonest and not straightforward is also within his control. And that is what that little personal story about Gene Pedraza demonstrates. I woke up one day when I realized what he had done, and I made the choice to be honest and straightforward. I have to remind myself that every single day. Every single day I could wake up and be dishonest. Every single day I could wake up and get off the beaten path. There is nothing that prevents us from doing that but our own sense of moral and ethical responsibility. And as a law enforcement officer, there is nothing more important that we possess than our integrity. And that one small domino pushed in the wrong direction can destroy a career or many people's careers. It can destroy your reputation. It can destroy your agency's reputation. It can have an impact that you never expected when you do that one thing wrong. So wake up every single morning and make that same declaration to yourself. Let me leave you with a journal prompt. Ask yourself this: what small domino in my life could lead to a major consequence if I don't clean up my act? What small domino, what tiny little issue could turn into a big issue? Is it that tiny issue of, the thing that you're eating every day, or the Skol or the Copenhagen that you're packing into your lip every single day? Is that going to result in, a cancer diagnosis, a terminal cancer diagnosis? I don't know. Name and find that small domino in your life. Name and find as many as you can and recognize them for what they are. The first in a chain of events that could lead to major consequences if you don't clean up your act. Ask yourself what it is and make a list. Thanks for listening, folks. There's a couple ways you can support the podcast if you are so inclined. Number one, pick up a copy of my book, In Valor. If you already have a copy of my book, please go on Amazon and rate and review it for me. 5 stars would be awesome. If you think it's worth 5 stars, I sure would appreciate it. But that book is available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, anywhere that you get your books. Apple Books, Walmart. It's available on Kindle and Nook for instant download. Or as I said, you can get it on Amazon Prime. You can have the paperback tomorrow or the next day if you order it. It's a great resource for anybody who wants to practice this philosophy on a daily basis. It's going to give you quotes, contextualization that is directly relatable to your life, to your job, to your career. It's going to give you some daily journal prompts and action items. It's going to be very similar to what you get here on the podcast. If you'd like this podcast in your email inbox 4 times a week, you can hop on over to thestoicresponder.substack.com and you can subscribe for free. You can get this as well as my weekly newsletters with Stoic leadership and personal development tips. And finally, the easiest thing that you can do if you don't want to spend money, if you don't want to buy the book, if you don't want emails coming in, the easiest thing that you can do to support this podcast is to simply like, share, and subscribe. Share it with somebody else. Let somebody know what you're getting here. Give it a rating wherever you get your podcast. Like, share, and subscribe so that others can learn what we're doing here. It's only going to take you a few seconds, but it means a lot to me. So thanks so much, folks. We got one more for you. Until tomorrow, you are out of roll. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to subscribe, like, rate, and share this podcast so that we can spread the benefits of Stoicism to other first responders. It will only take you a few moments, but it can help us tremendously. Until next time, out of roll.